So as you can see by nature of the Zoom um, deal, that it gives a bit of a kind of fun, interactive, and non-formal look to these concerts. And I'm Christine James, and most of you on there know me. Thank you all for joining. This is the third concert of our Rocky Mountain Composers online concert series, which is a new thing that we're doing this year, just like a lot of people are learning to do things online and with technology. So it's fun, and I decided that I really didn't like the sound of the piano without having it mic'd. So with doing all of that, then we have to use microphones to talk through and earbuds to listen through for it to work. And so it's, complicates our classical way of performing quite a bit. But it's always good to learn new things. So I'm going to start out sharing my actually an old but most recently finished composition called Nocturne. And I'm not going to tell you a lot about it. We can talk about it afterwards. I just want to kind of leave it to your imagination. And after I'm done with that, we'll have a brief question and answer time. And then I'm joined by my beautiful friend, Lisa Dubois, and Loveland Painter. And we are going to do our music and painting collaboration improvisation. And this is something we started doing about a year ago. And we've done it out in public a few times, and we have 2 more upcoming events, and then actually 4 days the next 2 weekends in downtown Loveland. And then for the Rocky Mountain Composers concert series, we have 1 more concert on Wednesday, and that will be Pat Holmberg, and that will be Wednesday night at 7. So hopefully you can join that too. So without saying anything further, I'm going to play for you Nocturne.
beautiful.
So
Okay, so Chris Potter had a question.
I have a question. So when you compose, do you start from a melody that you hear in your head and then put a harmony to it and then figure out how you're going to develop it? Or do you actually start with something harmonized?
I usually start with a melody. This particular piece I started writing 27 years ago, and as well as I can remember, I believe it was just I was improvising, and it was something that, and parts of it came to me also like when I was away from the piano, but it was all melody that comes to me first. When I do improvising, a lot of times I'll start with a harmony and put a melody on top. But for most of my written down compositions, they do start with a melody. And then I just kind of I can hear what I want the harmony to sound like with it. Are you still hearing me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Chris,
Hey, John.
so evocative, and it's just lovely. My comment is how, as a composer, how difficult I've found it, and you succeeded in going between a style that's more diatonic, which is how you started, and then moving toward a more chromatic style, and you did it beautifully. And I've always found that a challenge, and you succeeded, and you brought it back at the end, and it's
Thank you. That's a huge compliment coming from you. John is also a member of our Rocky Mountain Composers group, and we have missed him at our meetings because he's been working the census.
Oh, wow.
it's,
Done counting.
Counting all of us. Yeah. Making sure we count.
yeah, count often.
Yes. This piece does have like an incredible amount of augmented force, a lot of augmented force, which is like a pretty big dissonance, minor seconds and major sevenths. And it's been interesting to me because it started out much darker. But I've lived a lot of life since I started writing this piece, and I've found a lot more joy in my life. And so as I was reworking it and writing the development section, and even in just practicing it the last couple of weeks, it's I feel like more light is happening in the piece and more hope and joy. Because even you guys who are pianists or play other instruments know very well that how you interpret something or perform it can really have a difference in the mood that it portrays.
And I heard some jazz in there too. Here and
Yeah.
there. Yep.
Well, I like jazz. I think I'm going to write a jazz piece next, though.
Had a question.
Yes.
You titled your piece Nocturne,
Mm-hmm.
and it started out with one of those arpeggiated bass figures that is often associated with nocturnes, and then you abandoned that and went on to something else for the middle section. And I thought that was very creative.
Yeah, it kind of makes one wonder what happens with me at nighttime, right? Anyway, that section is, I didn't even, I kind of started to analyze this later, but I am very influenced by Chopin. He is one of my favorites, and I actually studied quite a few of his nocturnes. My favorite one is the one in C sharp minor, which this piece ends up being in C sharp minor also. And I don't remember intentionally doing that. But he also has like some mazurka-ish sections in his, and I realize that this middle section feels like that to me, like a mazurka, and it's a little lively. I get a little excited in it, and I have to try to calm myself down with it because it is a nocturne, and we don't want to wake the baby up. So,
But nocturnes have very clear ABA form, and I thought you pulled that off really well.
thank you, Grace, and thank you, Grace, for she's running this show today, and she's Grace is Dr. Grace Asquith. She is one of our Rocky Mountain composers as well, and a lovely pianist and harpist.
I thought I'd ask something, and it's not on the musical side,
Oh, okay.
but once you start, sorry, I'm getting some weird feedback. Once you start composing and you have a musical thought or a motive or something going on, do you continue with it just on a pure musical sense, and you're following a harmonic structure, or you're following melodic ideas and, like you said, some certain intervals and structure, or are you getting into imagery or a storyline or a thought process and going off more on that type of imaginative process?
That's a really good question. This is Karen, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
Your voice just sounds a little bit different on here, so I'm like, I think that sounds like Karen. Yeah, because a lot of this was conceived 27 years ago. I can't remember for sure, but usually when I go about writing, I'll come to an end of a section and I'll go, okay, now we need something new here, and then I'll come up with what that next thing is. So there is some thought process to the form in that. And me, I don't like a lot of repetition, so that happens kind of too often with me that I want to go off in a different direction. And it was starting to happen with this piece too. So that the challenge of this piece was actually to be able to develop it within one of the sections I already had, and then be able to land it back into the original theme. So there was some thought process in, as I always struggle the most, and I think a lot of composers do, with a development section, how to go someplace really different and new, and be able to bring it back and settle back home again.
And was your inspiration mostly just where you wanted to go musically and harmonically, or was there
Oh,
a
storyline.
backstory to it or an imagery that was also directing you?
Yeah, good question. This one I believe is pretty much musical.
Mhm.
But after I got it all written, I looked back and I thought, it almost could be like autobiographical. I could see different places in my life in it.
Mm.
And so that was interesting to me.
Oh, I like that. That's cool.
Yeah. Okay, are we good on questions? You guys had some great questions.
I think we're good.
Okay, so now I'm going to introduce, and we're going to move the camera. And I want you to put your face in the camera for a minute, Lisa. My good artist friend, Lisa Dubois.
Hey everybody, I am Lisa Dubois. I am an acrylic artist mostly. I love to draw as well. And I do paint a lot improvisationally. And Chris and I, like she said, have done many of these things together. But each and every time, it's kind of like it's brand new. And I think that's just the nature of improvisation. I love the questions that you were asking, Chris, at the end about composition, because every single that question and her response, all of it transposes perfectly into the painting process, about the technical side of it and the creative side of it. So, and this is going to feel so much different, I believe, because where we've just listened to Chris's piece, Nocturne, on and talked to her about the composition and the years that it took to develop this. Now we're switching to the vulnerable stage of improvisation. And so every single, like I say, I've done it a lot, but every single time, because it's improvisation, there's a vulnerability to it. And Chris and I were discussing even just this week about, I was telling her, usually about midway, sometimes 2/3 of the way through any piece, whether this one's only going to be about maybe 10 minutes long, but I've painted as long as 2 hours live before. But there always comes a point where I really kind of pause in the technical side of it and think, what the heck am I doing? And this is either going to become mud and I'm going to finish it and just shrug my shoulders at everybody and apologize and say this is what it is, or the process will take on its new life. And it's in that moment where I realize that I'm focusing is too much on the technical side. And I need to bring my focus back to the creative side. And I believe it's God who gives us the creativity to do that. And so when I focus on Him and the creativity that He's given me is when it takes life again and it goes. So and what we have been working on in getting ready for the art studio tour that Chris mentioned, she and I will be painting and playing piano improvisationally together twice each day, and we really feel like now is the focus of light. And again, whereas God has given me that life and that light in me, I want to transfer that in this piece today, in that concept of darkness cannot overtake the light. And so you'll notice when I turn the camera over to my board, I'm painting on a wood board today, 12 by 16, and it starts out very dark. And you're going to see it transition to light. And I think that is also symbolic of who we are as believers in Jesus and carrying that light. And that is my hope. I recently had a time when a person asked me, what's my finish line of my core value? And my desire is that I become as transparent as I can so that others can see the light that is in me, that it shines through me.
Wow, that was amazing how it took shape, the painting. And that was really interesting. Really interesting. And that candle in the middle and how you shaped around it. That was really cool.
Show the painting.
I liked the way you both inspired each other. Sometimes the painting seemed inspired by the music, but other times the painting inspired a change in the music and the instead of a flowing texture, all of a sudden I heard more of a chordal structure.
Yeah, and Chris and I find that a lot where my painting inspires what she plays, and then what she plays inspires me, and I respond back and forth to it. And in fact, there was one time about a year and a half ago, we were painting live on a Friday night on the town, and I was painting almost in a different palette and kind of a quirkier painting than Chris is used to me playing. And she had just finished playing for another artist who painted this beautiful, peaceful painting of an iris. But then, so Chris started out just very smooth and beautifully and melodic, and but when she saw the quirkiness of where my painting was going, she adjusted, and it felt like then that there was just this cohesive moment where we're in tune together in both of our arts. You guys have any questions?
People are unmuted so they can ask questions.
So do you set up your palette with a certain color scheme before you start, or do you have like virtually every color there? Or how do you decide what paints to bring?
Right. I do have my favorites that are versions of the primary colors of red, blue, and yellow. So I always make sure I have versions of those plus white. And because this one, particularly where I knew I have a very short time to paint, most of these colors in here, I I have mixed before the session. So they're already mixed on my palette, just because I believe when I use too many intense hues straight out of the tube, that the painting is a little bit overwhelming. And so for time constraints, it really helps to paint live, to have my colors mixed.
Yes,
Lisa?
and the other good reason for that is kind of when she stops painting and goes to her palette, I have to keep things moving. I'm kind of watching her. It's like, oh, I gotta make something happen here because she's like taking a little break, getting some paint. So I'm glad you're not doing all your mixing while we're improving.
Right, right. And then also there's I don't know if you guys could hear me with my palette knives. Um, and the scraping of the palette knives onto the board. So there was, when we first started doing that, I wondered, lots of thoughts go through your mind, I'm sure, as a musician when you are performing, and the same with an artist. And so my first thoughts were, oh my gosh, I hope this isn't distracting to Chris or the listener. And so talk about what you experienced with that.
So when she starts to make noise with her painting, then like with palette scraping, I try to bring that and do something musically that goes along with that. Sometimes that presents me with a different rhythmic idea. Today I felt like I got very stuck in the arpeggiated left hand, which I really was going to try to get away from that more today, and I got stuck in C sharp minor. So I think it's because of doing Nocturne first, and I've been like practicing that a lot. So hopefully for next week I can get away from that. But when she does something like that, it does give me inspiration to come up with something different rhythmically. So.
Yeah, two comments. One comment, one question. That Chris, it's interesting you say you got stuck, that you felt it that way, because it seemed, for you it was stuck. For us, it created a space, a rhythmic space, a tonal space. So,
Good, great.
yeah. And Lisa, for you, when did you have the candle in mind?
The candle was really in my thought process from the beginning.
Before you started?
Um, what's
Yeah,
that?
before you started.
Yeah. And so just the transition of the dark to light. I think a lot of times as artists, I don't know if this transfers over to the life of a musician, but a lot of times as artists, we want to start with the focal point, or we want to start, with the point of interest in the painting and work our way out. But what I find too in painting, and maybe I would have in the studio, but in painting improvisationally, I'm also creating that journey, and I want to bring you along with me. So when I start the journey, you might not know that this is where we're going on the journey. So I feel like I'm leading you in the journey, and I this is the way I know to help you follow along.
Wow.
I was wondering, so Lisa, for you, do you notice as you're painting and you're experiencing different moods, have you noticed that when you're in a certain mood, are you drawn to certain colors and they start coming out more? And then for Chris, do you notice, are there certain keys that you're drawn to for certain moods? Like you said today, you were stuck in C sharp minor, and maybe that was because of Nocturne, or maybe that's because you're in a certain mood, or Lisa's art kind of inspired you to stay in that key, or just kind of wondering if moods bring out different keys and different colors. Have you noticed that? Or
Um, that well for me, I'm pretty much always in a good mood. so, so I mean, I guess in that sense, I don't think that my palette varies much with that.
Mhm.
Although when I love to do studies in value, which is to do a painting completely in my own pre-mixed version of black and white,
Mhm.
and I feel that it does have a different mood. Recently, I did a portrait of Johnny Cash and
Mhm.
in black and white, and I listened to Johnny Cash the entire time I painted him, and that was a pretty cool experience. And if you ever listen to Johnny Cash, you know that although some of his music is whimsical, some is pretty dark and serious. And that portrait really did come out with a different feel than a lot of my work, because I usually love to listen to instrumental classical music. Even when I work, I usually don't listen to music that has words, just because I want to stay in the right side of my brain. So I think my mood actually is affected a lot by the music, but my mood doesn't vary a lot. So it would be interesting. I'm thinking about trying different well-known people and musicians especially, and listening to their music as I paint them, because I think that brings some of them out more in the painting.
Cool. Interesting. Well, you spoke about the right side of the brain, and where I started feeling stuck was when I got into my left side of my brain. And, I start to analyze what I'm doing, and, that's just my struggle right now, is like letting go and letting it flow. To answer your question about the keys, Karen, seems like when we've been doing a couple of these light themed ones, that I tend to end up in sharp keys a lot.
Interesting.
And I started this in B, actually. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to be playing all these sharps. I'm kind of tired.
Eh,
So I tried to get out of it, and you kind of heard like I stumbled around a little bit. I hit a few things that maybe unexpected tones in there. And sometimes with that, I would go to like I'd go with that and go with a whole nother key. You
Yeah,
asked
and I
about
just
that,
kind of wonder,
but
that's interesting to me because I know I do much less when it comes to improvising and or composing than you, but I find myself super comfortable in either E flat major or C minor. That's where I always end up back in, and I really avoid sharp keys.
I
And I
really
just was
wanted to
wondering.
go to C. I really wanted to get to C for the light, as she was bringing more light into it, but it just like I didn't feel it. So I had to
So, but
stay.
so the keys though do give you like you do have a feeling the key itself changes. It's not.
Uh, it did. It changed. It actually changed back to C sharp minor from B, and I'm like, oh, I'm in C sharp minor. Hello again. And so I am starting though in preparation for what we're doing next week. I'm doing a color study on my improvisation, and I've done orange, and like, what do I think orange sounds like? And so she brought orange in, and I'm like, I really want to use orange, but I'm in totally such a far away key from that, and then I really had to think to like transpose it. I'll give you an idea of what orange sounds like to me. So, I'm going to do all the different colors between now and Friday. Mark my word.
Wow, that's
And then
ambitious.
I'll have to be able to practice like doing them in different keys though, because I couldn't just jump into C, which I wanted to do for your orange. But yeah. So, I mean, we're just kind of getting going on this, and we're learning how to do it. So,
That's awesome. Thank you.
anybody else? Well, thank you all for joining us today. It was a lot of fun to see. Now I can see all your faces on here that I really appreciate you all joining in. And do you have anything else you'd like to wrap up with, Lisa?
No, just thank you guys. Thanks for joining in with us today.
You guys have a great rest of your Sunday, and check out Rocky Mountain Composers website. Then you can find the link for our final concert on Wednesday with wonderful composer Pat Holmberg. And the art studio tour is, for those that are local, is the next 2 weekends on Saturday and Sunday, and downtown Loveland at the Grezowick.
It's right just south of the Black Steer.
South of the Black Steer on Lincoln. And we're going to be doing the live art and piano at 1:30 and 3 on all 4 of those days. So
There's 1 and 3:30.
Oh, yes, you're right.
1 and 3:30.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harriet. All right. Anyway, thanks for letting us plug that. You didn't have a choice.
Thank you.
And we really appreciate you joining today. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you, Chris and Lisa.
Hey.
Bye.
Mm-hmm.